The Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 will give humanity faith in the future.
A year late, and with a ban on spectators in Tokyo, the 2020 Olympics are finally underway.
The best athletes of the world are looking forward with anticipation to make their Olympic dream finally come true.
IOC President Thomas Bach is confident, but with athletes already forced out of these games with coronavirus and others isolating in Japan, just what will these pandemic games be like? On Sport Unlocked, the latest turmoil engulfing the Tokyo Olympics and the controversy over this week's awarding of the 2032 Games to Brisbane. Hello and welcome to the podcast digesting all the week's sports news, and we're coming to you on Sport Unlocked this time from Tokyo ahead of the start of the Olympics. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press. Alongside me here in the main press centre in the Japanese capital is Tariq Panja of the New York Times.
Hi Rob, thanks for inviting me on again.
And joining us back from England, unfortunately, Martyn Ziegler from the Times, who hasn't been able to make it out here.
Yeah, good that you've made it, guys. You're able to sit together, although you've got masks on, I see. It's personal reasons meant I couldn't join you in Tokyo, but I have to say it doesn't sound like a great bunch of laughs covering this event. It looks like it's all very, very tightly controlled from what I can see sitting back in the UK.
Yeah, there's very little chance to enjoy Tokyo. In fact, we're only allowed from the airport to the hotel to the press centre and the venues so far. And of course, we've had a bit of action so far with the football and softball getting underway. But yeah, we certainly can't go out in any restaurants, any bars, or even really see any locals. We're mainly lots of pictures and things outside of windows of media buses going around Tokyo.
Yeah, and they're taking it quite seriously. We have to have, at least for the first few days, daily PCR testing at least once a day. And if your results go south, you're going to be having to be placed in quarantine, which has happened to stakeholders across the board, athletes and journalists, 6 members of the British team, for example, countless others as well, Rob.
Yeah, this is one of the issues. We've had journalists, the BBC Scotland team got pinged after flying into Tokyo. Some of their flight tested positives. They have to quarantine for 14 days. Another journalist, Philip Barker from inside the Games, confined to his room as well for 14 days after being deemed a close contact. And of course, athletes who potentially could miss their events, not because they're positive themselves, but if they're close contacts, we could really shake up who's taking part in events, who's winning events.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Amber Hill, who was a medal chance in shooting the British athlete. She's pulled out. Can I just ask one thing? You can probably clarify. There seems to be a sort of discrepancies in how long people need to isolate for. For example, you say 14 days for those people who've been come into contact with somebody with COVID. But I was told athletes have to isolate a much shorter length of time.
Yeah, we've been confused too. There was a press conference with the IOC, and after that, we spoke to Christophe Duby, essentially the bloke in charge of running the Olympics for the IOC on the ground. And he said, "Look, is there a set day? Is there a number of days?" And he said it's case by case. And that only adds to the confusion, to be honest with you, because what Christophe was trying to suggest is that these athletes take tests every day, and when it's felt that they're no longer contagious, then and only then will they be cleared. But that means that some athletes could have, 13 days, 12 days quarantine, and others, who knows, might have 7 days and 8 days. And that raised the prospect. A Brazilian journalist asked the other day, are all athletes going to be treated the same? Essentially raising the point is if someone famous, someone important is, found positive, will they have to go through the entire process like most of the other athletes who aren't famous and are just sort of part of the crowd?
Yeah, can you imagine Simone Biles, for example, testing positive? I would imagine they would bend over backwards to make sure that she participated.
And of course, one of the alternates on the US gymnastics squad did test positive. So she's out of the games for now.
Yeah, that's right. We've already had athletes who are now in Tokyo and are ruled out of the games. That just must be so harrowing, having done all the training, got the qualification points or the times required to be here, moved into the village, told your parents, your loved ones back home, your friends that you're going to Tokyo to compete in the Olympics, and then bang, your dream is over. It's just must be so difficult psychologically for the athletes, even those who haven't tested positive, that tomorrow the hammer could fall on them.
Yeah, and the concerns as well about that close contact on the flights. Lots of people who've flown over. It was very noticeable on my flight from London on Sunday just how empty it was, given the fact we're just days away from the Olympics starting at that time. Yet basically the only people on it were largely athletes and media. Of course, there was a bit of a differential. The fact some Team GB were out at the front in first, others were at the back in economy. And of course, I was firmly at the back, although a completely empty row, which is something you wouldn't normally get on a flight to a long haul Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, that was empty. But what's funny here, the protocols are quite mixed, Ziggs. So we have to have these masks on. We have to try and socially distance where possible, but we can only really travel on the media transport. And that means taking these buses into, say, the media centre or wherever. Often those are packed, like the Piccadilly line from Holborn Station at peak time in London. So you're cheek by jowl next to someone in order to get to somewhere where the rest of the time they've told you, not to distance. So I think it's kind of creaking, I would say, not falling apart quite yet, but creaking and maybe confusing.
And very much an odd experience here, unlike anything we've had during the pandemic, because there's an air of normality. We're in a huge press centre at the moment with hundreds of journalists all gathered in one vast space. Yes, there are perspex divides between people. Everyone's got to wear masks, but it doesn't seem like a lot of ventilation, and it's a huge room with everyone mixing around. So it probably feels very much like in part things are back in England since we had Freedom Day on Monday.
Indeed. They actually, what some of the a couple of the British athletes have spoken out about their flights over, saying that they wanted some asked to move seats so they could have more space, and that was refused. So it sounds like you had quite a good flight. I know Team GB only paid for economy class flights for their athletes, and it was up to individual sports or individual athletes if they upgraded.
The one great thing about being a press centre is, unlike normally on the pod, we have someone else to be able to grab on, and someone who's a big fan of serious sports news broadcasting and has been a long advocate for it is Mike Keegan from the Daily Mail, the sports agenda columnist.
Hello, how are you doing, Tiggs?
Yeah, good to see you, Mike. I've seen your pictures of your hotel room. It doesn't seem the most luxurious of circumstances in which to isolate in.
No, I do feel a little bit like, is it Full Metal Jacket, the Vietnam movie, where he just lies on his hotel bed staring at the fan on the ceiling? Absolutely tiny. It's been grim. Worst bit's the jet lag. So you fly in and you're cooped up for 4 days in Tokyo hotel rooms, unless you're paying a lot of money, which obviously our employers don't tend to do, and not the biggest. So it's just a case of pretty much being in there for 4 days, and then you get 15 minutes to go outside, go to the convenience store. Those 15 minutes quite quickly become the highlight of your day. So yeah, going for some water, some apples and some pears, it's like this is living the dream. So very much looking forward to when the two weeks are up and we can start getting out there and seeing a bit of Tokyo.
It's apocalypse now, actually, Mike.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's not just been the coronavirus that Tokyo organisers have had to contend with. There's been chaos for months, hasn't there, in terms of the figures behind these games, and we've had yet another resignation on the eve of the opening ceremony. This is, in fact, the director of the entire show has been fired because he made a Holocaust joke during a comedy show in 1998. I mean, this follows other departures in recent months. We had Yoshimori, the organising committee president, resigning over sexist marks. That was complaining about women talking too much in meetings, which was absolutely misogynistic. Then we had The creative director for the ceremony is resigning after suggesting a Japanese actress should dress like a pig. And then it's been a real struggle, it seems, for the Tokyo organisers to be able to get competent people without any sort of blemish against them.
It's maybe not. Maybe this is a sign of a culture having to change. To me, the scale and the number of these cases, and the fact that some of these are dated back a little bit, suggests that some of these men, Maury, I think he's 80 or 90, were been able to get away with type of behaviour that isn't acceptable in certainly not Western countries, the places we are, for some time, and Japan is catching up to that a little bit. It's like they're all blokes, they're all men, aren't they, who've been kicked out for speaking ill of women. There's been a case of someone who, when he was younger, bullying disabled kids. It's just boorish behaviour that may have been acceptable in places we live in the 1970s, or not deemed unacceptable. That Japan might be catching up. What do you reckon, Mike?
Yeah, it's a lot of it seems to be this kind of. We saw it quite recently with the England cricket team. People going through Twitter accounts and looking at stuff that had been tweeted a long time ago, and then somebody comes back to the fore. And some of the stuff that these people have done. I mean, the guy admitted to bullying disabled kids at school, and then laughing about it in an interview. It's like, how on earth did you get to this stage and still be in a position like this? So it's been quite an eye opener. It really has.
Martyn, obviously you've seen many Olympic committees over the year. How do you rate how this one is actually handling it in unprecedented times, but really going through a lot of turmoil in the final days ahead of the Games?
Yeah, I mean, from a distance, I think their communication has been hopeless. They take days to respond. They never answer the questions properly. It's sort of, I think they've been so rattled by the whole pandemic that I'm sure hasn't helped them. But yeah, I think it's a serious lesson for future organisers not to do it this way.
See, you said they're quite late to reply, but yesterday they got themselves in a bit of trouble by being a bit too early to announce something. 2 hours before Brisbane was selected as the Olympic host for the 2032 Olympics, it was the only candidate, but the IOC spokesman the night before, Mark Adams, had insisted it wasn't a done deal and would be subject to a vote from the IOC members, who he seemed to suggest would take this sort of thing really seriously, and would base their votes on whatever it is that they're going to be presented with. But anyway, midway through the Brisbane celebration, we got a press release congratulating Brisbane on its victory. It was embargoed, but it said when Brisbane wins, you can put this out. And everyone's been saying this is a pandemic. Why are the IOC flying out all these members? And one of the things they're pointing at is that they've got really important decisions to make, like selecting the IOC, the Olympic host city for 2032. And obviously, it was a done deal, and we've all been wasting our time. Thanks to Tokyo 2020 for highlighting that for us.
And of course, it was something we covered very early on in the pods a few months ago, this whole behind-the-scenes deal that led to Brisbane being awarded the Games without the usual contest, without the bidding rivalry, which of course cut out the need for all these expensive consultants and potential corruption in the actual rivalries. But you had even Qatar who agreed there wasn't going to be a formal process to ensure it was at least partly in public in terms of sense of a contest of some sort to host the Games.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a contest, but it was controversial for other reasons as well, Mike.
Yeah, the video that came out is probably one of the most extraordinary press conferences that I've seen, where John Coates was on doing a briefing for Australian media with the Queensland Premier at the side of him. And she's been at the centre of quite a lot of controversy because she's cut the number of quarantine hotels when people come back into Australia, which hasn't gone down well. So there's a petition with 130,000 people basically saying she should not be coming to Japan because she's going to have to stay in one of those rooms, which she's cut so other Australians can't do what she's doing. So she's clearly quite sensitive about it. She said this would be a flying visit, and that she would, be back as soon as she could. Now, she has gone on record to say she will not be going to the opening ceremony. And in this bizarre press conference, Coates actually switches his microphone on so everybody can hear him, and then delivers what appears to be an incredibly condescending dressing down, in which he basically says, "You will be going to that opening ceremony. You will not be hiding in your hotel room." And again, you said about the IOC and their responses just don't answer the question. Myself and one of your colleagues from the Times is basically straight onto them to say, this looks like it's incredibly sexist. This is supposed to be an inclusive games, and yet you've got Coates basically ordering the Premier of Queensland to come to the opening ceremony, and their response was just an absolute nonsense, as you say. It didn't answer the question.
And we can now take a listen to what John Coates did have to say. Coates is the president of the Australian Olympic Committee. He's also a vice president of the International Olympic Committee. He's also the president of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Let's take a listen to how this really frosty exchange unfolded.
You are going to the opening ceremony. I'm still the deputy chair of the Candidature Leadership Group, and so far as I understand, that there will be an opening and a closing ceremony in 2032, and all of you have got to get along there and understand the traditional parts of that, what's involved in an opening ceremony. So none of you are staying behind and hiding in your rooms, all right?
I don't want to offend anybody, so...
Never been to an opening ceremony of Olympic Games, have you? You don't know the protocols. I think it's part of it's a very important lesson for everyone here. The opening ceremonies cost in the order of $75 million to $100 million. It's a major exercise for any organising committee. It puts the stamp on the games. It's very important to the broadcasts that follow, and I think it's my very strong recommendation is the Premier and the Lord Mayor and the Minister be there and understand it.
Coates has long had a history of sort of quite unpleasant bullying behaviour. It's been called out before. Tariq, I think you know about this, don't you?
He probably has more hats than any senior figure in sport at the moment. You've just gone through a few of them. He's probably got half a dozen more. He's in charge of the Tokyo Coordination Commission, the head of the IOC's legal commission, head of CAS, which we'll come to in a minute. And yeah, in 2017, he was challenged for the Australian Olympic Committee leadership, which he's now held for 30 years, which, talking about, good governance, etc., talking about term limits, but there doesn't seem to be any in Australia. He said he was going to maybe step down next year. Now Brisbane have got the Olympics. And yeah, there was an internal inquiry, and it revealed a culture of bullying and toxic behaviour in general at the AOC. But what was interesting was his response. He said, I'm just the president. I don't run this place, which was remarkable given how sort of controlling Coates is. And it's to me as a journalist, it was quite surprising that Australian media haven't particularly been looking at this man. There was a period of stories in 2017 around that election, but it kind of petered away. I was writing wrote a large piece on Coates before the latest controversy this week, and it was hard to get anyone on the record. I spoke to a lot of people in Australia, and no one wanted to really get on the record because of the power he wields, and that probably isn't the best sign for sports governance.
Yeah, I mean, Coates was very deeply involved in the Sydney Olympics and bidding for that. I mean, if you look back at what the Australian Olympic Committee did to secure the crucial votes for that, it's incredible. They actually agreed to pay money to the two African IOC members, not as a direct bribe for them, but towards their Olympic committees, and it was deemed okay. It's incredible.
Well, of course, as we build up to the Olympics, at first that will be largely behind closed doors. It's not the only thing happening in the world of sport, and not the only sport affected by the pandemic. We thought things were starting to ease up, particularly in England. The fact that we're preparing for a new Premier League season to start with full stadiums, potentially. But it's a big event in England taking place later this year that is being impacted by the pandemic. It's the Rugby League World Cup.
Yeah, horrendous news in that Australia and New Zealand have withdrawn from that. They've dropped it on the organisers, from what I'm told, with very, very little notice. That there had been the fear that this was going to happen, and it's got to be hard now to imagine that tournament carries on, because as people who like rugby league will know, Australia are the current champions. The sadness is that I was at the final in Brisbane last time round, and England put up their best performance against Australia for years. So for them not to be there, for New Zealand, the other superpower, to not be there, I would be amazed if this tournament now goes ahead.
Simon Johnson, who's the chairman of the Rugby Football League in England, saying that the decision is selfish, parochial and cowardly by Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, he never holds back, does he, Simon Johnson, when he needs to speak out about things? And Claire Balding, the president, she said it's strange timing. I mean, there are questions about, is this entirely a sort of health fear by Australia and New Zealand, or are there more things involved in terms of like the domestic NRL game? What do you think, Mike?
I think we've seen for a long time there's been a suspicion that Australian clubs especially just don't want it. And why would they? It's a purely financial thing. The NRL is a huge beast. Rugby league domestically is miles more popular in Australia than it is in the UK. I think generations of rugby league fans in this country will remember getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch the test matches from Australia, and those are some of your greatest memories. But over there, you look at the crowds that we get. Sydney Roosters, South Sydney, they're pulling in 20, 30,000 every week, the crowds that we can only dream of. So they will probably think, why should we take our superstars out of this game to go and play in the UK in a tournament that isn't going to pull huge figures? And the sad thing is that recent internationals in Australia and New Zealand, there's empty seats everywhere. And it just really does like this could be the end of the road for international rugby league, which for me is an absolute tragedy.
Well, away from rugby onto football. We're just a few weeks away from the new Premier League season starting, but there's a new cloud over the reigning Premier League champions, over their financial fair play case. It's not gone away. Yes, they managed to avoid that Champions League ban after UEFA found that their case was time barred, according to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but those football leaks we got a few years ago about just how did City comply with FFP, about their income, what was the source of it, how was their sponsorship money being filtered around? Well, it's something still being investigated by the Premier League and still potentially something that could lead to sanctions covering a period when they won titles.
Yeah, we've had a Court of Appeal ruling has come out, which some remarkable language in it, really. There's a senior judge, Lord Justice Males, saying this is an investigation which commenced in December 2018. It is surprising and a matter of legitimate public concern that so little progress has been made after 2.5 years, during which the club has twice been crowned as Premier League champions. So, what we've found out from this court hearing is that the Manchester City have challenged the legitimacy of the arbitration tribunal set up to do this. They've challenged any attempt by the Premier League to require them to provide documents and other information. They've been fought it all the way, and they may even, I guess, go to the Supreme Court on this. They've got Lord Panic, probably the most expensive and best QC working for them, and we've not had the full publication of the rulings on this yet, because I think there's still a possibility they may go further.
Yeah, there's a risk of provoking social media fury, etc., which it seems to always happen with this story. I don't know why, but I do wonder. Manchester City have insisted from the very, very start of this, which feels like 50 years ago now, that they are clearly innocent and they have documentary proof that will exonerate them. But if you look at the details of this case, they're digging their heels in order not to provide these documents to the Premier League, which they still haven't. The whole point of this particular case was the Premier League was asking Manchester City for documents related to their financing and finances, and City have said no. And that, to me, doesn't jive with the defence, which is, if you only looked at our documents, you'll see that everything is above board, because all you have is half a picture. If you see everything together, this will all be sorted out. And it's the second time this has happened. Because if you look at the Cass case, again, Manchester City failed to provide UEFA and UEFA's lawyers with the run of emails. That means what followed and what preceded what was published in football leagues. Curiously, in that case, UEFA's lawyers, and I've spoken to many other kind of legal experts on this, and they're baffled too. On the eve of that hearing, they said, "Oh yeah, you're right. Let's just do the hearing. We don't need the emails." And in the CAS ruling, there was a point made, as well as a time barred aspect of it. It was like, hang on, had we seen these emails, we might have been able to make, a fair judgment. And in fact, we haven't. Means we can't, and that's another reason why they didn't rule against Manchester City.
And also questions about the secrecy around this case. Not only Manchester City wanting it kept in the dark, the Premier League wanted it to stay completely away from public view, a secret justice, as it were, when it's a case that so many in football care about and so many are interested in. And the ongoing surprise, perhaps, that Manchester City so adamant at their innocence, so keen to remove any stain at all, have not exactly been cooperating the best of ways with the investigation.
To be fair to City, you can see their stance on this. But look, this has only come to light because their email system has been hacked and people have taken what were confidential documents. So for then people to turn around and say, right, we not only want these documents that have been hacked to go public, but we also want the context around them. You can kind of see why they would be like, well, hang on a minute, this shouldn't be in the public domain in the first place, and now you're asking us to reveal anything else. But I think Rob makes a very good point with the Premier League. If you've got the Premier League as well saying, we want these kept private, I don't know, that doesn't look like a great look for me.
It's always nice to have a bit of toing and froing on a pod, Mike. But they were caught. These emails did come out, not that they wanted them to, and the rules are the rules. If the emails are there, and there is perhaps a case to answer, you can't say, it's because they were hacked. We've been caught potentially cheating, so you can't look at them. Once it's in the public domain, because as journalists, we're not hacking anyone, but we will get documents. We might publish a story that other people do not want out in the public domain, and that can lead to an inquiry. This stuff's out there. We might as well get to the bottom of it.
It's a fair point, and that's our bread and butter. A lot of the time is getting our hands on these documents and getting them out there. So this will probably sound a little bit two-faced, but I think if they are bringing in disciplinary action, it's kind of like, if this was a court of law, then if you secretly recorded a conversation with somebody, or if you stole somebody's emails, would that be admissible as evidence? And I think that's probably the stance that City will take.
Of course, in Spain, football leaks did lead to various tax investigations and cases against leading players, managers, Jose Mourinho, Lionel Messi. But of course, these things are viewed very differently in different jurisdictions, just what the public interest might be. And obviously something keeping a close eye on as this new Premier League season prepares to begin. As we do, though, focus for now on the Olympics, which should be the sort of respite away from the frenzy of football that dominates so often, and the transfer world in particular. Of course, this week we've actually had a new competition as well, starting in the world of cricket, the 100, which is something hopefully we'll look at in a bit more depth in the future. But of course, no cricket in the Olympics yet.
No, and it's something that appears to have gone down well. The first game down between Surrey and Manchester. I don't know. Do we really need it? That's the question. We've already got T20. You look around the stadiums for 2020 games. There's loads of women and children, and I don't know. All the eggs seem to be in one basket. And if it is a success, great. But I think we have to look at the impact that has on the other formats of the game. My personal opinion is I don't think there's anything wrong with T20. I don't think we need it. I think COVID has had its impact on it. We're consistently told the world's best players will be there when half of them have dropped out. I don't know. You want it to be a success because you want cricket to succeed. I just hope that the other formats of the game are protected and don't suffer on the back of it.
Yeah, I can't see in the long run how you can have both T20 and the 100 together. It's a bit too similar, isn't it? I think it's they'll might coexist for a bit. I'm sure something will have to give way in the long term.
Well, they're still hoping, of course, their place in the Olympics. Been also good to talk through some of the other sports news issues bubbling along, and also great to have Mike Keegan as a special guest here in the press centre.
I'm very much privileged. I've been waiting to do this for a long time.
Great to have you on, and shame you can't be with us, but Martyn Ziegler from the Times back there in England, keeping an eye on things and keeping check on us from afar as well.
Yeah, make sure you don't break any rules, guys.
And Tariq Panja from the New York Times, great as ever as well.
Yeah, nice to be here with you guys, and we're off to Germany versus Brazil at the Yokohama Stadium, a repeat of the 2002 World Cup. And there are, despite all the sort of moans and groans you might have heard here, we are really excited to be here, aren't we, Rob?
Yeah, it is. It's great. And, Olympics, I think the action will start to take over. And for around the world, a lot of people will be watching on television, just like normally. Olympics is not a mass travel event. You don't usually get thousands, tens of thousands coming from abroad, as we see for World Cups and European Championships the like in normal times. So for many around the world, it's always a television viewing experience. And that's very much how it will be in the next couple of weeks. But for now, thanks all guys, and thank you everyone for listening. If you've got any thoughts, of course, you can always message us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We're at Sport Unlocked. We're sportunlockedpod@gmail.com. And the most important thing, if you can rate, review and subscribe to us on whichever platform you get your pods from, because that means we drop in there automatically in your feeds every week, hopefully. But for now, thank you for listening and enjoy the Olympic viewing in the days ahead. Goodbye from Tokyo.